Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's war cabinet and government is convening to vote on the long-awaited Gaza ceasefire agreement. Two far-right Israeli cabinet ministers, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, have voiced opposition to the deal, with Ben-Gvir threatening to quit if it's passed. As Palestinians await confirmation the deal's been secured, Israel continues its deadly attacks across Gaza. Over 113 Palestinians have been killed since the truce was announced Wednesday, at least 28 of them children. This is Sami Abu Tahun, a displaced child living in Al-Nusrat camp.
I only wish to return to Gaza City for one reason. I wish to see my father again. Since our displacement, I lost something essential in my life, the presence of a father. When my mother asked me to go pray, I refused, because I wanted to pray with my father. We hope the war will end next Sunday, as they say in the meetings.
If approved, the ceasefire deal will go into effect Sunday, including the release of the first hostages. We'll get latest on ceasefire after headlines. Israeli troops have carried out another day of raids across the occupied West Bank. On Thursday, Israeli forces raided the Askar refugee camp, shooting and wounding 3 Palestinian teens. Separately, Israeli military vehicles entered the grounds of the Arab Evangelical Hospital in Nablus and took up positions in the courtyard. Overnight, Israeli soldiers raided the Tulkarem refugee camp, where there were reports of gunfire and clashes with Palestinian fighters. This all follows an Israeli airstrike on the city of Jenin Wednesday that killed 6 Palestinians and left scores injured. On Thursday, mourners held funeral processions for the dead, even as they welcomed the Gaza ceasefire deal.
The Jenin refugee camp was supporting the Gaza people during the 15 months war on Gaza, and thus we expect calmer times for Jenin.
Since October 2023, near-daily Israeli raids on the West Bank have killed nearly 800 Palestinians and injured 6,700 others. Over 14,000 have been arrested. Outgoing Secretary of State Antony Blinkin was confronted by 2 journalists as he delivered his final news conference at the State Department Thursday. The Gray Zone's editor, Max Blumenthal, disrupted Blinkin just minutes into his address to reporters.
You waved the white flag before Netanyahu.
We'll have the time to take questions at the end.
You waved the white flag before Israeli fascists.
We'll have the time to take questions at the end.
Your father-in-law was an Israel lobbyist. Your grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirk through the whole thing every day. You smirk through a genocide.
Blumenthal was addressing State Department spokesperson Matt Miller at the end of the video. Matt Miller then ordered security to preemptively remove independent journalist Sam Husseini, forcing him to shout his questions to Blinkin towards the stage as he was forcibly carried out of the room, then handcuffed.
Everybody from Amnesty International, to the ICJ is saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal! Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague?
Right before the journalists confronted the Secretary of State, Blinkin thanked the press for, quote, asking tough questions. Earlier this week, a ProPublica report detailed the Biden administration's repeated pattern of issuing empty threats and warnings to Israel over the past 15 months, allowing Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to dismiss any red lines from Washington while continuing his genocide in Gaza with impunity. Senate confirmation hearings continued Thursday for Trump's cabinet nominees. Scott Bessent, nominated for Treasury Secretary, advocated for more deregulation and higher tariffs and opposed increasing the federal minimum wage. Bessent also called for extending Trump's 2017 tax cuts, which is projected to add $4 trillion to the federal deficit.
This is the single most important economic issue of the day. This is pass-fail. That if we do not fix these tax cuts, if we do not renew and extend, then we will be facing an economic calamity.
Trump's pick to lead the Interior Department, former North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, praised Trump's agenda of so-called energy dominance, but vowed to, quote, follow the law and follow the Constitution. Former New York Congressmember Lee Zeldin, nominated to lead the EPA, asserted, quote, I believe that climate change is real, unquote, but would not commit to regulating greenhouse gases if he's confirmed. Meanwhile, in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis named Florida Attorney General Trump loyalist Ashley Moody to fill Marco Rubio's Senate seat. Rubio is expected to be confirmed as the next Secretary of State. Miami Herald reports Moody sued the Biden administration 9 times since 2023, including on immigration policy, transgender rights, COVID-19 policies, and student debt relief. Rudy Giuliani has settled with 2 Georgia election workers he was found guilty of defaming. The deal allows Giuliani to avoid a trial and keep his apartment in New York and condo in Florida in exchange for an undisclosed payment to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, and has pledged not to further defame the 2 women. The mother-daughter duo welcomed the opportunity to, quote, move forward with our lives, unquote, after the deal was reached, calling the last 4 years a living nightmare. In California, some mandatory evacuation zones around Los Angeles have been reopened after firefighters made significant gains battling 2 massive wildfires. As of Thursday evening, the Palisades fire was 27% contained, the Eaton fire 55% contained. Officially, the death toll from the fire stands at 27. But a new study by Yale University's Climate Connections predicts that toxic smoke combined with disruption to the economy and health may lead to thousands of deaths over the coming years. It's already the costliest wildfire event in California history. A report from Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs estimates the cost to insurers alone could reach as much as $30 billion. On Thursday, dozens of climate activists with the Sunrise Movement held a protest outside a Phillips 66 terminal in Los Angeles, demanding oil companies pay up for the wildfires and other climate catastrophes. Last year, oil and gas interests successfully campaigned to kill a California bill that would have forced polluters to help cover the cost of climate disasters. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Gutteres has blamed the fossil fuel industry for the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles, linking them to the broader climate crisis. In a speech Gutteres gave to the UN General Assembly on Wednesday.
Look no further than the hills of Los Angeles. It has gone from the home of disaster movies to a scene of disaster. Who pays the price for climate destruction around the world? Not the fossil fuel industry, pocketing profits and taxpayer subsidies as their products wreak havoc. Every people suffer.
The U.S. has announced sanctions against the chief of Sudan's Armed Forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The Treasury Secretary accused Sudan's military of lethal attacks on civilians, including the use of chemical weapons and the denial of humanitarian aid. This comes just days after the Biden administration imposed sanctions on Sudan's rival paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, and a week after accusing the RSF of committing genocide. The UN says more than 150,000 people have been killed since fighting erupted April 2023. 11 million people have fled their homes, while famine has spread to at least 5 regions. Earlier this week, a local volunteer network said over 120 people were killed during shelling in Abdurrahman, the twin city of Sudan's capital, Khartoum. In the U.S., an Ohio woman who is charged with felony abuse of a corpse after having a miscarriage has filed a federal lawsuit against the hospital and healthcare providers who treated her, as well as the police and the city of Warren for their role in criminalizing her pregnancy loss. In 2023, Brittany Watts was denied abortion care at 22 weeks pregnant, despite being told her fetus was not viable and that she was at risk of hemorrhaging and sepsis. She miscarried at home several days later and was criminally charged 2 weeks later after a hospital worker reported her to police, falsely claiming she improperly disposed of the remains of her pregnancy. President Biden is making history, commuting the sentences of nearly 2,500 federal prisoners convicted of nonviolent drug offenses. The order will benefit people who received harsher punishments than they would have under modern sentencing laws and practices, including those given lengthy sentences based on distinctions between crack and powder cocaine. Biden has now issued more individual pardons and commutations than any other U.S. president. And the meatpacking companies Purdue Farms and JBS will pay $8 million for exploiting immigrant children who worked in their slaughterhouses after reaching a settlement with the Labor Department. The companies came under scrutiny in recent years after a series of reports revealed unaccompanied youth, mostly from Mexico and Central America, are being maimed and burned while working at meat plants, often on graveyard shifts. Federal law prohibits children from working in slaughterhouses due to dangerous conditions. The money will go to the children as well as organizations that assist them, including Kids in Need of Defense. And this latest news, the Israeli Security Cabinet has approved the ceasefire and hostage deal. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.